think we have a very interesting topic today. We're going to talk about MDR and EDR and some of the differences and what fits where and et cetera, et cetera. And we have an expert with us today. Well, we have a few people. We have on a panel discussion. So there's me, which is not entertaining at all. We have George Cork from Digital Nomads, and we have Paul Barrett, the brains of the NetV Pro operator. Oh wait, founder of NetV Pro, and we have the lovely and talented, which I should have said that for all the guys. So we have Jamie Moore from Blackpoint. Jamie is an expert, a recognized expert in the space. She's been on a few different power lunches, done a great job. Actually, backed by popular demand. The Blackpoint power lunches are some of the most popular ones we've had. So, Jamie, if you're willing to tell us a little bit about the demographics of who you are and Blackpoint, we can do that, and then we can get into the show topic a little bit. But for those as well as I do.
Thank you guys so much for having me on today. Blackpoint Cyber is a cybersecurity company born out of folks from the offensive world. And I tease my coworkers. I'm like, you say offensive and not everyone knows what you mean. They mean hackers, just polite speak and government sanctioned stuff, right? So our company is a little bit different because we bring that offensive mindset of how to break into networks. And we weave that into our ways to detect and stop threats inside environments. So me personally, I've been working in cybersecurity for 8 years now. I joined the Blackpoint team about 2 years ago, and I'm just here to help educate as many people as possible about cybersecurity.
All right, very good. Thank you, Jamie. I think one of the things, and kind of in a full disclosure mode, so Blackpoint is a partner with NetV Pro. We are very interested in the, let's say, the approach that Blackpoint has. It kind of turns the security space on its ear a little bit, and thinks about it in a different way. And personally, from a Keith's perspective, I think that it's important to do that in today's climate, is to think about security in a different way, because the bad guys know how we think about things. The bad guys understand security space, and that's why they're bad guys, but they understand the security space, and thinking about it in a different way, I think, is essential to being able to defend yourself. So I think that. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I was on a call earlier today, and traditional kind of IT cybersecurity minded person, and they asked me, they're like, okay, so if I get a list of these latest, IOCs, indicators of compromise from this or that source, and I send them to you, will you upload them into your system and then verify that we're protected? And I'm like, you want us to wait until you get a list of ways that you could get compromised, then you want us to spend time uploading that list into our system just for you and verify that you won't get compromised in the, like, no, man. Like, we're not doing
just
that.
Not how it works.
How it works.
Well, I think, and I'll remind everybody that today's session is a little bit different. It's going to be more conversational. It's not Jamie talking at us and showing slides and those types of things. This is a discussion and a roundtable discussion with a panel of experts, and experts and one good-looking person. Well, two good-looking people, myself and Jamie, being those people. But to kind of forward the thought, and I mean, talk about that aspect of thinking about this in a different way, and that I end up being, in my professional life, I'm in the sales channel, and I run into that, Jamie. Just what you said is that, okay, we'll do this, but tell me I'm protected forever, and that whole concept doesn't really fly anymore, right? I mean, I would say that the whole idea of being 100% safe from a border perspective isn't really where it's at anymore, and that's we can get into that with MDR and EDR a little bit. And let me just say, just to set the level set. So when we say MDR, we mean managed detection and response. And when we say EDR, we mean endpoint detection and response. Would you agree with those kind of descriptions, Jamie?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I will say that marketing in general, marketing departments across the board have gotten a hold of these terms, and they just smack them onto everything, right? But if you really like Google, look up the definition, EDR is going to going to basically define a tool running on a system that automatically detects and responds to threats. It's a piece of technology running. MDR pretty much states that you backing up your endpoint solutions, looking at your environment and doing active threat hunting in the world or in the environment. So they're very different, but they're similar too. And you might have elements, and you should have elements probably of both in your environment.
Right. Distinguished panel members, feel free to jump in at any time and interrupt me and things like that. Otherwise, we'll just keep it rolling. When you think about EDR and MDR, I really think about MDR as being more of I don't know if I want to say an enterprise type of a solution, but it's kind of more of an umbrella over everything, right? I mean, EDR talks about the endpoints. Does EDR really do much as far as, is EDR more than classic antivirus, or would you relate that to classic antivirus? I have my opinion, but I would like to see what you think about it.
So, and again, this is where the words have been kind of taken over, and they mean different things to different people. Typically, when I talk about an EDR, I do mean something that started as an antivirus, but does have some machine learning built in to where it's a little beefed up, it's a little souped up. So instead of just saying this known database of hash values are bad, like I was talking about earlier with what this guy wanted, and we're going to block all of this behavior. EDR with machine learning built in will try to look at the behavior that's happening on the computer, and will say, oh, well, because this process is running in this way, I'm going to stop that automatically. And again, value to that, right?
Right. When I think of EDR and versus classic antivirus, I describe classic antivirus as it's like driving your car but looking through the rearview mirror. Because classic antivirus only knows what happened in the past.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't know what happened in the future, and it doesn't recognize behaviors. And when we think about EDR, to me, it contemplates behaviors and what might happen in the future, and it can react to that.
Oh, it's like my decision-making skills in my early 20s versus now in my 30s. Early 20s, I just knew, oh, that was bad, I'm never doing that again. Now I'm like, maybe this is going to happen in this way.
Before I drink the pitcher of kamikazes, I remember and I think about it might be a bad outcome in the future.
So just for clarification then, what you're effectively saying is EDR would be from the older nomenclature of a host-based detection. It is the endpoint of your perimeter as opposed to a managed, it could be more of a holistic as well. As opposed to just looking at the endpoint, it could be looking at your endpoint. You could be looking at network, servers, firewalls, and getting a holistic view of more than just one data set. Because I see that one of the biggest challenges we've had is the perimeter has really gotten blurry with the mobile workforce moving into the cloud. It was very easy to have a security model of crunchy on the outside, soft, chewy in the center, because we had very clearly defined perimeters. So we need to have something that is going to be more than just a definition match to be able to identify potential threats based on behaviors more than just hash values or indications of compromise. That's actually my 3 cents.
That's a very good point, George. I mean, when you think about it, the perimeter has changed, with, the COVID and things like that. And we think about endpoint, as being one thing, but when we think about MDR, well, MDR really involves maybe a correlation, the ability to have a human involved and to see, to make an intelligent, or hopefully an intelligent correlation between events, right? Because EDR would be if this, then that.
Right.
But doesn't MDR kind of contemplate the gray area between?
Exactly. I think about it a little bit like a traditional arms race, right? So viruses started, people were using computers, and then bad actors started writing viruses, and these viruses would make the devices act funny. It would pop up a bunch of ads because they were getting paid by clicks on those devices. They were problematic. They would slow down systems, just more of a nuisance kind of thing than really the detrimental destruction of ransomware that we see today. So to offset those programs, we had antivirus that was born, right? And it does a really great job at stopping known bads. So then the hackers were like, oh, okay, you're going to block my known good or bad processes, or good process, all perspective. I'm going to start changing things in my code. I'm going to start switching the name. I'm going to start obfuscating, the types of techniques I'm using. And my goal is to get this program to run and bypass your antivirus. So then again, arms race, right? The good guys created EDR, added machine learning into the antivirus program, beefed it up a little bit more to counteract that trickier virus. Okay, so the hacker said, fine, I'm not even going to depend on the virus. I'm going to get into your environment through by exploiting a user who has credentials. I'm going to use basic Windows tools to explore this environment. And then I'm going to start moving from computer to computer, setting up my shares and downloading my toolkits so that when I push the go button, I know what EDR or antivirus you're using, and I've bypassed it already. I've stolen all your data and I've copied it off site, and I'm going to win when I push the go button. Managed detection response is the answer and the solution for that higher level of threat. And again, each piece is important. I'm not saying you throw out antivirus or EDR or MDR, but you need the stack in order to keep yourself secure.
So I'll throw it out there to the panel. I mean, do we see an environment, or do we contemplate environments where one works, one solution or one strategy works better than others, or is MDR the thing? Are there times where maybe EDR makes more sense? Or like I said, I'll throw that out to the panel to think about.
I think it's going to really be dependent upon the business. If you are a smaller business and you've got a limited amount of resources to be able to monitor and respond, then you've got to have some way of being able to offload that particular skill set to somewhere that is trusted and able to manage it. But if you've got a bigger company that has the resources to be able to manage it, I personally would always try to have as much in-house as possible for that particular security stack. But that's me.
Yeah, and I'll chime in. I mean, there's liability reasons to outsource it to somebody else that has the experience and the tool set that they developed. So to me, it makes a lot of sense, unless you're an extremely large organization that has, those skill sets way beyond, we're talking, Microsoft, Google kind of level kind of companies. I mean, everybody else should be looking at, bringing in some experts to help them out with that.
Those are actually two great points. So I want to Amy's brain a little bit on her thoughts on that. And does one of these technologies act more as a force multiplier than the other? I mean, is that one way to think of one of the technologies?
Mm-hmm.
I have my thoughts. What do you think?
So when I'm counseling people on what cybersecurity tools to put in place, I am really counseling them to have a pragmatic mix and to look at the impact each tool that they're layering into the solution is going to give them. One of the things I like to do is look at the NIST cybersecurity framework, just because it has 5 easy defined functions that they recommend all businesses have in place in order to keep themselves secure. Identify your assets and your risks, protect them from the risks, right? That's your antivirus or your firewall, your edge devices, your filters, all that jazz. You need to detect when something has gone wrong, respond when something has gone wrong, and then recover. A lot of businesses today have been running with the ability to identify, protect, and recover. And it's kind of like building a house out of a stack of wood, spraying the whole thing with flame retardant, and then having another stack of wood next door so that you can rebuild the house when something goes, catches on fire. What Blackpoint is doing and what we're trying to bring into small to mid-sized business is the ability to say, hey, there's smoke over there. Let's grab the fire extinguisher, walk over, put it out before the whole structure is involved. So when you say, is one better than the other for the environment, I think, again, they are all crucial. The limiting factor is budget and which tools are going to give you the most bang for your buck in relation to that, or in regards to that budget.
And I think the other one that I think Paul made a great point to think about is the question of liability. I mean, if I'm a small to medium-sized business and I'm doing my own cybersecurity stuff, I would have a certain burden of liability. If I were to work with Blackpoint, does that shift it in any way? I mean, I guess, well, it'll be our secret how you answer this question. Don't tell anybody how you answer that. I mean, I think that's a great point to think about. Well, what say you?
So I think that risk is all about, again, trying to shift your liability. So Paul was on to something. Now, what you're going to do if as a business owner is minimize your risk by making sure that you're partnered with a company, a cyber or an IT company who is using the right pragmatic mix of cybersecurity in your environment. That's going to limit your costs and limit your risk surface. The final amount of risk, you're going to be hard pressed to find an IT company or a cybersecurity company that's willing to assume all of that. So what you do with that last bit of risk is you use a cyber liability insurance policy. So you are saying, I have done everything humanly possible to prevent a bad actor from being able to smash my environment. I have employed experts, which by nature reduces my liability. And then I am covering that last bit of liability that I can't completely get away with the funds and the ability to respond in the event that I need to. And that puts you in a really good position. And again, it's the type of stuff you got to do first, because you can't put the genie back in the bottle after you've had an attack. That is the wrong time to take a look at all this stuff.
Right.
Well, and I think that you also run into what is the company's appetite for risk.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't really sit down and say, well, what is an acceptable risk to us? Or they don't have it qualified as what is the true extent of the risk that we have by not addressing this. So what you can do is you can either address the risk, you can mitigate it, or you can transfer it. Yep. So getting the outsourced experts would be a way of helping transfer that risk onto them to be responsible for that. And then your final step would be acceptance of, okay, this is what's left, get a policy to protect ourselves if it gets through that. But something that Jamie had said before is a very sound practice, which is called overlapping security. Just because
Jasper gets really excited about overlapping cybersecurity.
That was very timely. It's an exciting subject.
Just because you have antivirus doesn't mean that you are protected from all viruses. Just because you have an IDS doesn't mean that you are protected from all intrusion scenarios. So having multiple tool sets where available to be able to have additional visibility or choke points is a good practice. For example, having different AV engines on different systems so that if one doesn't catch it, the other one has a chance to. Having different network monitoring systems overlapping where you're able to put those in is a good thing. So the biggest problem is that we're always chasing a moving target of 100% secure. Every time we take a step forward, that goalpost just keeps getting moved a little bit further away. So the problem that Jamie had alluded to at the very beginning was we're always in a game of catch up. It is very hard for us to get ahead of the bad actors because how much do they have funding and how much are they incentivized to be able to keep trying to break what we have? And now the supply chains is, I mean, we just saw the Kaseya debacle. And one of the worst things with that was Kaseya required you to turn off AV scanning of their working directories because it interfered with their product. Well, that's a perfect welcome mat for them to be able to
I think that's a problem. Is that an issue?
Don't ask that question.
Don't
Come
worry
on.
about that. Hey, you can trust us.
Well-
No worries here. You can trust us. Just shut off that AV stuff.
But that's the catch. It literally is the open door for them because it allowed through the first tier of your security model if your security model was AV based detection only.
So what I'm hearing is security is kind of like dressing for cold weather. You need to address it in layers.
Or like a
For the first 5 yards. Does anybody else have any questions before we kind of get into time crunches? I just want to make sure if anybody has any questions for the esteemed panel members, Jamie specifically, we have a chance to ask those. So open the floor. If anybody has any questions, feel free to shout it out.
So I think one of the things too, while people are typing their questions or getting ready with their questions, one of the things to keep in mind again is while you want layers, while you need that complexity to your environment, also keeping in mind that your users need to be able to do their jobs. You need to be able to manage these systems. One of the most common exploits that we see are security tools that have not been patched. So something happens with an edge device, the vendor throws out a patch and no one pushes it out, and then 6 months later it's used to exploit the environment. So taking the conscious step to put layers in place, but then also understanding that each layer has some baggage that you have to manage and making sure you have the bandwidth to do so. It's equally important.
And I'll pause for a moment to see if there's any questions. I have a follow-up to that, Jamie. All right. Not hearing any specific questions, I'll kind of go into that. I mean, so we've probably all had that experience where we have the antivirus product that's onerous to the, I don't want to say the host, but to the client that it's installed on. Is there one of these technologies that would be less burdensome on maybe a thinly provisioned client than the other? The floor is yours, Jamie.
That is an absolutely amazing question, because we weren't really talking about that earlier. Ideally, you want to be running best EDR with machine learning built in, and a managed detection and response team to be able to respond in real time to threats as they come up around the clock. But I have seen systems that just can't handle that advanced type of machine learning and crunching on the system. That's why our particular endpoint detection tool that we use, that we created ourselves, that does a lot of the heavy lifting for us, it is a super lightweight kind of program, because we're just capturing the metadata and then we do all the crunching in the cloud. So if you have systems that are really resource strapped, I would recommend using a very lightweight antivirus, something to just catch the low hanging fruit, and then backing it by managed detection response, a team to review stuff in real time and see if there's problems going through the environment.
That actually brings up another point of clarification. If you are running with an MDR, looking at an MDR EDR product, then can you back off a little bit on that AV product? I mean, it'll be our secret again. We don't want
Our secret is being recorded here. I know how this works.
Right. But I mean, from a strategy perspective, I've encountered organizations that have said, you know what, I'm just going to go with the free antivirus, and I'm going to use the other products to make sure that I'm shored up. And when you're building the business case, that's something to factor into it. Or am I all wet? If I'm all wet in that, you can go ahead and tell me I'm an idiot. That's fine.
I think actually I'm gonna echo what George said earlier. I believe it was George who said it depends on the company's appetite for risk, and I think also the consequence of the devices that you're trying to protect. If you are trying to protect devices from getting ransomware, but if they're ransomware, all you're going to do is re-image the machine and redeploy it, then you're okay to use lighter tools and use less expensive ways to take care of your network. If you are a financial institution or a medical institution and there's high consequence to your data getting stolen, where you're going to either get fined or you have end customers that are going to be negatively impacted by the theft of the data, that adds a layer to that. Maybe you shouldn't skimp.
I've in the past, I've coined the term purpose-driven security.
I like it.
Yeah, it kind of actually, it makes sense. Who would have thought it?
You gotta remind us cybersecurity people of that from time to time, because we get so wrapped up in just, I want Fort Knox here. Not on my watch, man.
You brought up a very good point earlier, and that's the usability of the technology for. I don't like using the term end users. I say internal customers. So, but we want our internal customers to be able to do their job, every day effectively and without hindrance. So, as security folks, we do need to think of that, and that was driving the question around the impact or weight of that client on the end user, internal customer.
So there are areas where I'm less flexible. Multi-factor authentication is one of them. It's no fun to have to find your phone wherever you left it and then grab it and then run back to the computer and type in your code every time you got to log into something. But those couple of seconds of inconvenience compared to bad actor getting access to your cloud platform, do the
it does. I
multi-factor.
think it goes back to that whole conversation of what, and one of the things that I'll do when I'm talking to people is ask, so what does a breach mean to you? What happens to your business if you are breached, or what happens to your reputation if you are breached? What government rules are broken if you are breached? Those types of things. And I think that's all part of the discussion. So it really isn't necessarily a one size fits all, but if there were, which type of technology would you recommend, Jamie?
Yeah, so one size fits all, I'm always going to tell people to use, it's actually a rather long list, but I'm going to say managed detection and response with an EDR on the system. And if you have to give up the EDR to pay for the MDR, but you're still going to run antivirus, okay, that's going to still give you a human watching the network and making intelligent design. Our days of relying on automated tools to provide adequate protection to our environments are over, and they've been over a long time, because a machine or a yes/no binary decision-making process cannot tell the difference between Keith logged on to a computer at 2 a.m. pushing updates and Keith logged on to a computer at 2 a.m. stealing all of your company files.
Keith
You
logged
need a
on at 2
person.
a.m. and elevated privileges,
Mm-hmm.
and
Order a
Yeah.
whole bunch of pieces.
Exactly. So if
He's
you got
like,
to,
DoorDash.
Yeah, so effectively what you're saying is something that's been in the industry for a while here is it's not just the machine learning, but it is the behavioral analysis of connecting the dots that normally would not fit a normal pattern recognition. So if you have a person in accounting and all of a sudden that person signed in from a state that they normally wouldn't sign into, well, do you predefine all of those or do you look for the one-offs? So it's correlating that data, and the problem that we've had is machines are great at making lots of data, and finding the signal out of all of that noise is really the challenge that we have to filter through to be able to understand what it is that we're really looking at and looking for. And that's where a lot of detections get missed, in my opinion, is that there's just so much noise that the actual indicators aren't always there standing out enough for us to be able to respond to them before something else has been able to get escalated or pivoted from there.
yeah, because what I can say to that, George, is that it wasn't a machine learning process that detected the Kaseya vulnerability 2 Fridays ago. It was 2 guys in our SOC, both taking in the same information, looking at each other and saying Kaseya breach, and launching into effect. And that is just invaluable. You use machines to do what they do well, crunching large amounts of data, getting it in front of the right people, and then use people to make the decisions. And someday that equation might change. Technology might advance to a point where you can reduce the number of people involved in the process, but we aren't there for sure. And we need those people.
Very good. I'll throw it out there again. Does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to ask the panelists or Jamie, or you guys want to understand what goes on with my beard products, any of that type of
Talk
stuff?
about the dogs, barking
What
in the
kind of dogs?
background.
What kind of dogs do you have?
German Shepherd and a Belgian Malinois. It's the Malinois that screams instead of barks, and I don't know why. He's always been like that.
Those are great dogs. I have a brother-in-law with the Belgian Malinois. Yeah, so those are great dogs. Anybody have any dog questions? All right, we'll get back into security. This is podcast gold, by the way, for those of you who maybe don't recognize it. I mean, this is just not an experience you have every place else. Learning more here by accident than other places by design. So just to kind of put a bow around things, I guess. Good question here. We got a question from Pat, and so in a perfect world, or let's say a world where, I don't want to say budget doesn't matter, but in a perfect world where you can do what you want or what you would recommend, what would a security program look like? What should a security program look like?
So I know this is a panel, but I do have a slide for this one, and then he can take a screenshot. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh, it's disabled. I can't.
Wait, here, hold on. We'll go here. We'll do this.
I could rattle them off, but I think
No, Go ahead.
Image is worth 1,000 words.
You go ahead.
So this is our pragmatic stack. This is the pragmatic stack on the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Make sure it's not my calendar back-to-back meetings instead. So what I'm going to recommend.
That's a recipe for pork loin. That's weird.
Right. The other screen shows Peace, Love, and Little Donuts because we were talking about that at the beginning. I was like, what was the name of that donut place? All right. Here's my recommendation for a pragmatic stack. This is not from the sales team. This is from our threat hunters, really putting their heads together, and they're like, I wish everyone did this. Now, are there nicer things that you can add on top of this? Absolutely. But for a start, you need to have managed detection and response. You need to have people watching your environment and taking action quickly. It's smoke detectors and the fire extinguishers that I was talking about earlier, right? You need to have a next-gen antivirus, or EDR, ideally, is what we're talking about here. Multi-factor authentication turned on anywhere you can turn it on. A secure way to for your users to remotely access the information that they need. A next-gen firewall to do intrusion prevention. Next-gen RMM, so that's an industry term, but we're talking remote monitoring and maintenance, and then backups. You can add email security in as well, because email is the #1 threat. But if you use all of these pieces and have them weaved together, you're going to have a rather secure environment that is a slightly faster human running from the bear than the other humans running, Paul, if you would.
So where would Zero Trust product fit into this circle?
Yeah, so I would say that would be in the nice to have. That would be the next level. So if you get your house is in order, you've got all of these other things, and you want to add in Zero Trust, that would be a next step for us. So not saying it doesn't add value, because it does, but adding it before you have your bases covered doesn't make a lot of sense to us. You need to make sure you can see things, recover from things, manage all your assets, control access to the data, turning on it. Because again, some of these are not even taking into effect what's going on in the environment. They're thinking about other things too, right? So multi-factor authentication. You put all those in place, and then if you still have budget and appetite to reduce your risk, add in Zero Trust.
Just this little nugget right here made it worth the time and effort to join the PowerLunch today. Very nice.
Did everyone get their screenshots? And again, I usually have email security written here instead of RMM. So make sure to make a mental note of email security.
That's a great picture.
There we go.
I did ask you a question in chat. I don't know if you want to wait to answer that one after we stop recording.
I will. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, and I look at the security stance of a business. It has to complement the business. If we put in all of the tools and all of the stuff, and it makes it impossible for the business to do its job, it's going to get thrown out, and it's going to be worse than no security product. So making sure that what we do choose is going to be less disruption to the business where possible. So if the biggest pain that the customers in our environments have is dealing with MFA, that's great, because that means that we are able to get most of the rest of the stuff slipped in and functioning without them being aware that we've actually done more work. But if they are always struggling and fighting up against the security provisions that we put in, all it's going to be is a choke point of productivity, and you're going to be really having a hard time justifying why all of this is going on.
And for that reason, I would say that's, despite being an extremely effective security solution, that's why Zero Trust to me is the next level to go to, depending on the appetite of the customer, because those environments take a lot of management to make sure you are allowing all of the trusted activity. So you get hit the nail on the head right there with the usability of the network being a key aspect.
Got another actually good question here I'd like to squeeze in before we go, and that is, if a business's data and processing are being hosted in a third-party data center, do they really need to think about and have a comprehensive security plan, or what should that look like? Is it the same? Is that
George and I look like bobbleheads.
Oh, settle down. George's gonna need a neck
It
brace.
doesn't matter where your data is, you need to secure it.
All right.
And if it's being hosted by anybody, you should be asking them what their security plan is as well in case they get compromised. Because you've just extended your perimeter and you don't know what security measures they have in place, or are you having your data on shared resources?
Yeah,
I'm-
I'll answer from a NetView Pro perspective because we are doing hosting out of our Rockford data center, and we are requiring our customers to bring their security solution either buy ours or bring their security solution with them because it's their environment, not our environment. So now we've done things in our way to secure them as best as we can, and we provided that to the customers, but in the end, if we have a VPN tunnel into their network from their hosted environment, I don't know what's going on there. So I tell them they have to bring their security solution.
Because ultimately, guys, hosted just means stored on someone else's equipment. It's still data on a server somewhere, right? And thus is still vulnerable to anything, if not more, than what you would be in your own environment.
Yeah, the old adage, the cloud is just someone else's data center. I mean,
Right. All right, very good. Do we have any other questions?
We got to stop the recording so I can answer Paul's question.
Let's say if not, we can stop recording. We can go into the NetView Pro After Hours section.
Woohoo.